In fact, I'm going to start today with our guest, Steve. Steve is the global head of innovation for both finance and risk at HSBC, where he leads an innovation ecosystem that shapes structure and delivers better ways of serving their customers through innovative solutions. He is an accomplished transformation expert with 28 years of experience in consulting, telecommunications, and financial services, and he guides geographically diverse teams and drives large-scale, complex strategic initiatives across multiple organizations. That was a mouthful. I hope you can appreciate that. It's his passion for innovation, along with his growth mindset, that drives his continuous learning and really is the impetus and the very reason that we are about to have this conversation today with himself and Jeremy and Justin. As for our two Stanford hosts, first we have Jeremy Utley. Jeremy is the Director of Executive Education at the D.school. There he is. And an adjunct professor at Stanford School of Engineering. He's also, and I can personally attest to this, an outstanding collaborator and teaches many celebrated courses at Stanford. We also have with us today Justin. Justin is the founder of the Professional Fellowship Program at the D.school, where he also heads up strategic partnerships. As an adjunct professor, he's also taught several popular graduate courses in design thinking and organization design. Gentlemen, it is a pleasure being here with you today, and please take it away.
Thank you, Robin. And wanted to say hi to everybody. I'm here in London, so good evening to the people who've joined in London. And funny enough, I got a ping from somebody that they're joining from Hong Kong. And it's, I think, 1 a.m. out there in Hong Kong, and somebody else from Japan as well. So it's early days. Looking forward to speaking to Justin and Jeremy for a while.
We've got the Earth just about covered, right? Because Justin, you're in Hawaii, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
From Hawaii to California to London, all the way to Hong Kong. I mean, that's incredible. We've got the globe covered. Well, it's a pleasure to get to be with you, Steve and Justin, as always. And today I'm really excited to dig into a topic that I think is near and dear to all of our hearts, which is bringing the tools of innovation and democratizing them to make them available to folks who perhaps prior to encountering them wouldn't have thought of themselves as creative. I think we are all in the business of sparking a sense of creative passion and possibility and confidence among folks, not just who are artists, but also who are analysts. And so it's really exciting to get to talk about how you've been doing that in your organization. And I guess, Steve, maybe perhaps where we could start, if we just roll back the clock, so to speak, when you set out on this journey, what was the impact you were hoping for or looking for in the beginning? And maybe how has your vision of impact evolved as you have been on the journey with us?
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Jeremy. And funny enough, the impact has been incredible, and I'm really happy about that. But I started off selfishly, so it was more about myself and how I wanted to develop myself. I knew I needed to do something different. I wanted to learn about innovation, but I didn't feel like I knew enough to be able to lead innovation and drive innovation. So I decided to say, all right, let me do a Google search and find out where is the best innovation program I could find. And sure enough, I saw the Innovation and Entrepreneurship program at Stanford. I read through a lot of it, and I decided to join it. And I'm glad I did, because the first course I took was actually your course, and it was an online course. Exactly. And it was around empathize. And as I was going through that, I was like really eating up the information. I was really liking it. And I thought, imagine if I could bring this back and take my learnings. I had a lot of aha moments, bring it back, and how I could have a wider impact. And that was kind of the genesis of kind of the creation of this course and making it available to everybody.
Maybe we can start there, because there's one thing you said. We invited you to write a series of blog posts that we've been jointly publishing, and I was struck by a comment you made. I know the class intimately. We filmed it a few years ago. I remember being in the Hyatt in Santa Clara back when, pre-COVID, when we were allowed to be in hotels, interviewing people and putting this footage online. And the whole team at the Stanford Center for Professional Development was saying, are you seriously going to have people go to hotels? And in the early days, students would enroll in the course and they'd send notes going, wait, seriously, do I have to? I thought this was an online class. But when we say online, it's a misnomer of sorts, because it still demands that you engage with the world and interact with human beings beyond the screen. But there's something that you called out in your blog post, which I thought was great. You said at one point in that course, we ask a simple question. When was the last time you spoke to a customer? And you made a comment there in that blog post. You said, that was a penny drop moment for me. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind, just for yourself, because you said your journey started primarily with a learning agenda for yourself and a growth agenda for yourself. What do you mean that was a penny drop moment? Why was it a penny drop moment? And what kind of change did that spark for you?
It's funny. Oftentimes, people will think that they know what the problem is, and they'll already sit there and work what the solution is. And, I see it, and I'm guilty of it myself. I'll go out there and say, oh, I know what the problem is. I'm going to go build a database. And before I really understand what the problem is, really understanding what the customer wants. And you guys had put out some stories about things that got built that they never talked to customers and how it miserably failed. And so I thought, you know what? When is the last time I spoke to a customer, right? And doing some of that exercise. And I really like the hotel example, because that's what really made it live for me, is you guys forced us to go out to hotels. So I went to London and I went to interview people in some London hotels. And amazing. I can tell you, it becomes uncomfortable when you go up to people and say, hey, can I interview? Because they're already looking at you kind of weird. And like, who are you? Why should I be talking to you? And really asking them the open-ending questions, and stop to listen and use all the tools that you guys mentioned. So while it all sounds like common sense, the reality is when you're in that position and you have to sit there and capture insights from people, the structure and the approach that you guys provide is incredibly useful to me. And before, I thought it was kind of very soft skills, but you guys have a really good structure, and I see how you go from step to step to step to build on, and I really enjoy that.
I don't know if it's a finance thing or what, but I'm a finance guy by training, and I always thought of creativity as kind of soft skills. And what I would say is what that meant to me was it was frivolous. It was trivial, right? And so it was really, I remember when I encountered the D.school, 15 years ago myself, when I was in business school, I was blown away by how rigorous creative practice is and how hard it was. I thought, it's like a clown training program, but it's far from it. You mentioned taking risks and the importance of taking risks. And one thing I would say, and I commend you for this, is my observation is it's really easy inside of many organizations for leaders to tell others to take risks, but not take a risk themselves. I mean, I remember, not with your organization, but with another organization in the United States, large financial services organization, we were working with them to build a capability around innovation as well. We had very senior leaders involved in the program. We're organizing this massive immersion in the field where we're going to go talk to customers, and we've got, charter buses and the whole 9 yards. And one of the junior team members kind of came to me and said, hey, I'm having trouble blocking people's calendars. Can you walk me through what exactly are we doing? Because I need to provide justification, because these are senior people who, their calendars are hard to get on. And I said, honestly, what we're going to do is we're going to get on these buses. We're going to downtown Boston, and we're going to go in the streets and we're going to talk to customers. And he kind of laughed. He said, okay, just to be clear, these guys don't talk to customers. That's what he said. So now that we know we don't have to do that, like, what's the next thing we're going to do, right? But there's this sense in organizations that leaders don't need to take risks. That's what other people do. Can you talk about your attitude yourself as a leader? Because one of the other comments you made in the blog, which I thought was spectacular, was leadership is about continuously challenging yourself. And I don't know that I think maybe that's a really great poster that people might put on the wall, but it's something you've embodied. And I wonder what inspired that attitude for you, and how do you continue to stoke it? Because the tendency is to be comfortable and get insulated. How do you keep provoking yourself and keep challenging yourself?
Yeah, I think it's kind of, you can easily get comfortable. And I could tell you there's been parts in my career that I've gotten comfortable. But, when you're uneasy, you're not happy where things are, you could either continue to complain or you can do something about it. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to do something about it. So I knew I needed to force something. I didn't know where I wanted to go. I didn't know where it was, but you kind of have a bit of leap of faith to say, you know what, I want to go in this general direction. I want to keep learning. And I could say that appetite for learning, curiosity, keeping an open mind has been key, because I've learned a lot from yourself, from Justin and others. And funny enough, I don't have to create all this stuff. I actually learn from people who have done it elsewhere, and I can bring it back and have a great impact. And they'll say, hey, that's great, that worked out well. But it's not something like I have to develop it all myself and it all has to come out of me. I really learned from the masters and figured out, hey, these are proven techniques that work really well, and I can bring them back. And so what I wanted to do is create something of value that would have an impact. And so I think that was the intent. Once I realized the power of what design thinking could do, I wanted to say, how do I create that awareness and more general, right? So I didn't want to just say, all right, I want everybody to turn into a designer. It was, how do I create that appetite and that awareness for enough people that they may want to go up that scale? So, give them a curated content on awareness. You can get certified, or you can be a master designer and give them that ability. And I think what we've seen, and I don't know if any of you guys follow on LinkedIn, but if you just go to the hashtag HSBC_DT, you could see people, and this is not scripted, this is their own feelings on the course and the impact it's had on their lives and in their jobs. And to me, that's what brings me satisfaction, is the ability that I can have an impact to others and make their work and personal lives better.
I wonder if you wouldn't mind, Steve, to give us a concrete example, because one of the things you say, you gave a little teaser in your second blog post, but you mentioned it was your responsibility to lead idea management and experimentation and drive proofs of concept like chatbots, things like that. And you said it genuinely helped us avoid pitfalls in the early days of the program. And I wonder, for folks who are thinking about undertaking a design-driven approach, when you say it helped us avoid pitfalls, what specifically did design thinking illuminate that, what did it help you avoid that you would have maybe stumbled over had you not used this approach?
Well, I think people are a lot more open in there. They allow time for design today, where in the past, like you said, it feels like a fluffy thing, right? So when I took your course, one of the first steps of your course in Empathize was to empathize. And can you imagine me working in risk, going to the senior management of risk saying, oh, guys, I found the solution. It's called empathy. And then they kind of look at me cross-eyed and say, what? Get back to work. And so really understanding, how do I translate that so that people can see the value of what comes out the other side? I've heard feedback on people that have taken the 101 course and the awareness course, that they took the course, it really opened their eyes, and they took that and applied it to different programs in the bank. And, because we're in early days, we're actually going to document all those programs and put testimonials on what and the impacts it's had. But people from developing new products, new POCs, proof of concepts, it's helped them make sure that they're working on the right what. And that's what's important, because we all have limited time, we have limited resources, and we want to make sure we're using our time in the best impactful way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is a problem well put is half solved. And having that sense of the biggest thing we can do is identify the problem we're solving. We can solve almost anything. Most failures aren't failures of execution. They're solving against the wrong problem itself. So that's great. What are
Jeremy,
some of the?
If I could add on the quote, because you've given me a quote, I want to give you a quote back. So I really like Einstein's quote. I don't know if you know Einstein's quote. It says, and I've put it here so I make sure I've got it. If I had an hour to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes solving that problem. And it's funny, you got one of the people that are considered the most smartest person in the world. And his approach, what he just said, is a design thinking approach, right? And focus on the what, not the solutions, focus on the problem and make sure you understand that problem. And even back then, I don't know when design thinking was first came up. Maybe you can give us the history on that. But you got Einstein sitting there talking about how he approaches problems in a design thinking way.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, I love that too. It's so counter to the conventional mindset. I think we talk about this in the DT 101 course, which we've rolled out in your organization. Is implement this solution. That's problem solving. Implement this solution. And what we say is, okay, let's do a couple of things. One, let's say, is that the right solution? And let's generate lots of options before we decide on what to implement. But two, and maybe as you're saying, even more importantly, let's make sure that's the right problem to be solved. And let's generate all the problems that could be solved and then pick the one that's most important to solve. And it's those two kind of outputs of not only what's the solution, but also what's the problem to be solved. It's a radical paradigm shift for a lot of people. And a lot of people really, it's liberating too to realize, oh, I can question the problem. The old joke, how many designers does it take to change a light bulb? Do you know? No,
I don't know that one.
Does it have to be a light bulb? Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, but there's really a sense of a liberty that comes when you say, let's actually see if this is the right problem to be solved. And a lot of times the answer is no. The answer is no.
Hey, Jeremy, just to kind of finish off on the history, I wanted to kind of show two pictures, and you haven't seen one of these pictures before, so I thought I'd kind of surprise you. So Robin, if you don't mind putting the pictures of the videos. I guess, Jeremy, back in 2018 was when I captured this moment for you and Perry. I was going there for the graduation ceremonies when I did my innovation entrepreneurship program. And I remember you had hundreds of people around you talking about, oh, I loved it and whatever. And I was talking to my wife at the time, and she's like, well, why don't you pull these guys aside and see if, they'll record a video and you guys can talk about how do you develop a program you can bring back to the bank. And I mentioned it to you, you're like, oh, that's a fantastic idea. And then we walked away from the crowd and we recorded a 2-minute video right then and there at the ceremony. Both you and Perry were nice enough to do it. But I wanted to show you another picture. Because I was really excited to come to the school, and I was hoping that I got to meet you guys and a lot of the different professors. Well, this is the picture. The lady sitting behind you was my wife, or is my wife, and she was sitting there to make sure she got good pictures. And then these two rock stars come in, Jeremy and Perry, and I'm like, oh my God, there they are. And I'm sitting there saying, taking a picture, and I'm messaging my wife. I'm like, those are the guys I was telling you about. And funny enough, you guys sat right in front of her, so I thought I'd share that moment with you. It was a special moment for me, anyway.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. That's amazing, Steve. It's humbling. We're fortunate to get to have you in our life, so it's pretty cool that there's a reciprocal appreciation. That's awesome.
Gentlemen, one of the questions that is coming up is one that we get frequently, which is essentially, we love the Design Thinking 101 course, but then what do we do next? How do we start to implement it? What are the best practices for rolling that out? And what kind of guardrails, did you learn, Steve, and how you started to spread it?
So for us in the bank, we have the 101. The 101 is the awareness. So like I said in the past, we're not looking to create designers of all of our 200,000 plus employees, but the people who do want to take it further, we're giving them a 102, a 103, and we've got a learning path to kind of get to that certified. The other people I wanted to have that awareness is when you see it, let's make sure we're applying it. Use the questions, use the challenging that design thinking teaches you. And when you're seeing being applied, be part of the solution, right? So be open to suggestions. A lot of times people throw an idea out there that you don't like or you don't think will work, your first reaction is to shut it down. Maybe take the different approach to say, well, how could I make this work? Does it really make sense? And think about, instead of saying but, say, well, what if? Or better yet. I think you guys have that better yet comment. And having that open mind to say, well, maybe there's something here to drive that out. And I think that kind of opens up to newer opportunities.
Yeah, I would say one thing that, and I just dropped it in the chat, and maybe the team can share it in the chat as well. One of the big things I'd say is creating space. It's in your actual calendar. I cannot emphasize enough that in this era, the Zoom era and the modern workspace, it's truly just incredible how people's calendars drive their time. And there's a sense of it, like a lot of times what I hear folks say is, I don't have time to experiment. I don't have time to interview somebody. And what I found is a very simple reframe is whenever you find yourself saying, I don't have time to blank, instead say, I haven't made time to blank, right? So if you feel you don't have time to experiment, say, I haven't made time to experiment. And I was in a meeting the other day with an Irish executive who she's working to bring experimentation into her team. She's the head of a major department, a major tech company. And she said, Jeremy, this is Wednesday morning. This is my 29th meeting of the week. When do you expect me to do this? And I just said, and I get it, but I pushed back and I said, here's what you should do. And this is the article that I just linked to. I said, pull up, granted, this week's crazy. Pull up your calendar for next week, create a calendar event for an hour. And we talked about the experiment she needed to run. The subject line of your calendar event is run the blank experiment, which involves sending an A/B test kind of email kind of a thing. I said, okay, I did it. And I said, now, 3 days later, add another calendar event, and the subject line is review the data from A/B experiment that I launched on Monday, right? And what I call this is writing a love note to yourself. And the basic idea is present me often hates past me because past me has booked a bunch of meetings that keeps me from doing the stuff I really want to do, right? So if I want to, in a sense, a way to do myself a favor in the future is to block time to do the thing that I wish I could do right now, right? And so it's finding a way, instead of holding up your calendar as an excuse for why you can't work differently, use judo, so to speak, to wield your calendar and to create space to do the kinds of things that you want to do, like experiment, like ideation, like engaging with customers. And a lot of times, if you don't feel like you're the owner of your calendar, then you need to take a little bit more ownership. And sometimes it means, when I realized this, by the way, a few months ago, wow, especially in this, COVID era, there's just meeting after meeting after meeting. Well, I only accept meetings if I have free time. So you know what I do? I started blocking time preemptively, proactively for the stuff that I care about, right? And it's a really simple tactic, but I find that Danny Kahneman, the behavioral psychologist, he talks about this. This is something that's been very helpful for me to realize too. When you're seeking to create behavior change, there's basically two forces at play with behavior change. There's what are called driving forces, meaning things that motivate the behavior change. And then there's restraining forces, which are things that prevent the behavior change. And a lot of times when we're trying to advocate for behavior change, our tactics are around driving forces, encouraging, incentivizing, motivating, reminding, etc. And what Kahneman says is actually a much more elegant solution is instead to remove a restraining force. And instead of saying, how do I get somebody to do blank, say, why aren't they already doing it now? And if I can remove that restraining force, and for me, all that say, the calendar and the meeting-centric culture is a restraining force to many people. And if we start to remove that restraining force, it opens up the ability to engage some of these new tools.
That's wonderful. Yeah, sorry. There's so many questions coming in, and I'm both listening, Jeremy and Steve, to what you're saying, and I'm responding to people in the Q&A. I figure that's a good.
I'm getting messages. I'm getting messages saying Justin is covering all the questions really well. So I don't know how to do it, Justin. I can't do both at the same time. I got to focus on who's talking and I get see all the stuff coming. So you're doing really well.
Great. Well, thank you. There are a few things I want to elevate. So a common theme is, the internal obstacles. My interpretation is, in an operational culture where there is a lot to do all of the time, how do you make room for this new way of working that won't show linear outcomes, right? Yeah. So Steve, in your experience, maybe if you could talk about that a bit.
First we have to win through successes, and you have to show the value that comes out of this, right? And there's a lot of really good examples in the market. A well-designed product or a well-designed process has X amount more value and delivery and uptake than something that isn't. And so what I'd like to kind of put is to show, listen, if we do this, there's going to be a lot more value and you're going to get exactly what you want. And then people are like, well, you know what? I'm too busy. I just want to get on and get started with it. And what people don't understand is then there's a lot more rework. You miss the point, and then you may even miss the opportunity. And so if I show by doing it this way and having the faith that we can do it, that they can do it, and they're starting to see it, and now they're actually leaving space for design and actually asking those questions. Well, have we looked at design? What is that customer journey? How does this apply? And you've got executives now demanding to make sure that it's the design-led change. Which is great. That's exactly what we want to do. So, but you have to do it through success. You can't just assume that, hey, guys, I read this thing and it's a great thing and it's design thinking and you got to trust me and you got to do it. You got to really show through success how it works. And then once they start believing it, they're going to, and I see it, people are pushing it themselves.
Cool. I really like this question, Steve. I see from the chat. Based on your experience, what advice can you give finance leaders to permeate design thinking in teams with the operational activities?
Yeah, I guess we can, number one is take the time and do the course, right? So understand design thinking. I often get times, I already know what it is, or this is all common sense. Really kind of stop, listen, understand. And I think what has made your course very successful, guys, is that you guys are incredibly engaging. So we've broken out the courses in little 15-minute bites. And so that's enough for people to kind of just take a couple minutes out of their day, listen to the course, and take some of that and really being able to apply it. So, I thought that was a great way of getting that course instead of just sitting down for a couple hours that people just can't do that. By doing that, it helps them understand certain processes or things that they can look at. And so, oftentimes I'm like, you know what, Steve, I don't have time to innovate, or I don't have time to make this process better, even if you might have a solution for them. And I say, well, you do have time. You don't have time not to listen to it. And again, as you start showing products and assets that they start seeing that could be of value that makes their work and life better, they're never going to go back to the old ways of doing things.
Steve, here's a big one that I know came up for us in our work together. How did the pandemic affect this effort to bring design thinking to the organization?
It was funny because, and Justin, I can tell you, I remember when I first kicked off, it was calling Jeremy, and I sent Jeremy an email through his I think it was his Gmail account. And then he was like, oh, yes, we could do this. And, Jeremy's a ball of energy. He was like, oh, we could do this and we could do this and do this. And then he brought Perry in. And then something happened where Perry couldn't come. And then they brought you in, Justin. And, the chemistry and what you and I were talking about worked out so well that we're like, all right, let's get this contract signed. It took us a couple months to get the contract signed. But finally, we got through the contracts. We got through all the legal piece. Who owns what? How do we get this up and running? And we're sitting there ready to go. You actually had bought your ticket. I put you at the hotel where we were going to run the course. And the World Health Organization says, all right, stop all travel, stop all things. there's a world pandemic and we have to stop. And literally it happened the week that you were meant to come to London to get this done. And so we had to pivot, right? And I was thinking, at that point, I thought it was over, right? I thought, okay, I lost my money with the hotel. You know, we paid Stanford to kind of come over here and do all this other stuff. But funny enough, you guys had the right mindset. And I think everybody wanted to see this happen, where we all pivoted and say, all right, now we're in this situation. What can we do now to make this successful? And I think that's where we actually did a pilot program a couple months later. And we did it through Zoom. And it was the first time you guys had brought this together. And you're like, all right, bear with us. So, you know, we used the design thinking prototyping to do it. We did a prototype. It worked really well. We got a lot of great feedback, but we got a lot of feedback. So we incorporated that feedback to the end product that just made that end product that much better.
Hey,
Hopefully
Steve,
that answers that question.
Oh, go ahead, Justin. Sorry.
I was going to say, you know, some of the principles that we learned in that, you all who are with us today are struggling with, you know, innovation amid the pandemic. One of the principles we learned was the sort of inherent trust with each other. You know, it's hard to navigate the uncertainty of not knowing if you don't trust, one, that together you will get to an amazing outcome, and two, that everyone individually is doing their best, right? And so this relationship that we have with Steve, and you can tell just by the way he talks, there's a lot of trust given even before it's, you know, earned in time or however else we build trust. So I think that's a big one in the pandemic, is how do you extend trust to each other, and as you navigate the uncertainty of logistics and learning and collaboration and all of those things.
You know, there's something too that I think is worthwhile to mention here, which is around reflection. And it's one thing to learn, but it's another thing to actually reflect on how things went, because we talk about beginning to make small applications and creating the space for teams who are learning new tools to actually reflect on how things went. That's part of trust building, to be able to give feedback, to be able to share, to kind of dissect an experience and say, where did things work and where could we improve next time? Steve, I wonder, as I look at these questions, one of the things that's striking me is, where have you seen early success in bridging from learning to application? Because you cover a bunch of different teams. Have you seen any particular parts of the organization respond more quickly to application, to practice than others? And what do you draw from those observations?
Yeah, and I would love to bring this example and kind of share this example, but I don't want to steal that team's thunder. But I'll give you at a high level without giving you too much detail. There was a big program that we just rolled out, and it was a very visual program. And the team that rolled it out said, I took your design thinking course. I loved it. I want to apply it to this program. And we sat down, we iterated with them. They rolled out the program last 3 weeks ago. It was a huge success. And they attribute a lot of that success was because they learned the design thinking methods. They applied that design thinking methods to the program.
Steve, what do you see? What do you see as next for the transformation? Now that you've got this activated network of design thinkers, what's next, and how do you think about shepherding the energy and the enthusiasm and the capability that you've been developing inside the organization?
Yeah, I think we're in the start of it. And just so you know, I mean, there's a whole crew of people and a lot of people that are part of a design community. So it's not just like I did it. I had a whole team behind me, and these guys were just relentless on wanting to get this out. So a lot of credit really goes out to the team and the people that are a part of the design at work at HSBC. So I don't want to give you or anybody the impression it's a one-person thing. This is hard work through a bunch of people like-minded that want to make an impact. So we created the awareness. we will really want to take, again, that up a level to say, how do we use that design and how do we push it out there? I think we're still need to make a lot more progress in that area and figuring out how do we design better systems. And I can tell you, it's a never-ending process, right? Because the good thing about innovation is there's always things to innovate, things to make better. And that's what I like about my job. I can't be bored at my job, because if you don't like the way it is today, don't worry, tomorrow it's going to change, right?
Mm. Mm. You know, one of the things, a question that just came through the chat, which I think is great, is this. Someone says, I work in risk management. I head the risk function at a company overseeing units in 10 different countries. Can you give examples of how you applied design thinking in the context of risk management in particular?
Yeah, I think, maybe we'll go back to the MRI, and you guys could probably answer this better than I can. So the MRI or the baby blanket warmer stuff, right? And, that's about risk management. This is about human lives and how that impact has, or even MRIs. If you can't get an MRI to work great because people don't know how to engage, or the kids didn't want to get in there because it was too scary and noisy, you have to look at that. And I think the same thing with risk management. You have to understand, what is it that you're trying to achieve, and is there a better way to achieve it? Or are you putting in a process or a procedure for something that's an exception that people really don't need? And it's really kind of constantly challenging yourself. What is the objective that you're trying to achieve? And is there a better way to achieve that objective through a different lens? I don't know if you guys want to mention kind of the MRI, because I think the GE MRI example is fantastic, or even the baby warmers out of Nepal, if I've got that right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Justin, you want to mention I think Embrace is a great example.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many lessons from that work that those students and now that company is doing. The big one for me is around problem framing, which has also come up in the chat from participants today. And oftentimes we frame the problem we're trying to solve around what we already do, right? Because it's where we're comfortable. And so if we frame the problem around the noun or around the outcome, in this case, they were asked to design a lower cost incubator for a hospital, right? Well, we know what that outcome is going to be. It's going to be a lower cost incubator for the hospital, because the solution's built into how they're asking the question, right? What they did instead was they went to Nepal, they interviewed people, and in their interviewing, getting proximate with the people they're trying to serve, they noticed there was a different problem that wasn't being met. And so they reframed it on the behavior, right? In this case, how to help a mother get her baby from village to hospital. And the reframe around the behavior opened up more possibilities for solutions, because they were no longer trying to redesign an outcome. They were trying to design for a behavior, an interaction. And that's what led to the innovation that now has helped save the lives of more than 300,000 babies around the world. So it's an amazing case, amazing example, but it's a simple lesson in problem framing, right? If you're redesigning the thing, it's probably going to be incremental innovation, incremental better version of the thing. But if you're designing for a human behavior, then that opens so many more possibilities. And it just depends on what is your intent. Are you going for core innovation, incremental, or are you going for something entirely new? And by the way, those are complementary. We need both of those things, especially in a company. You have to get better at the things that people are coming to us for. So, and the new has much higher risk, And
it's funny in that example. Sorry,
ahead,
Justin,
Steve.
sorry to speak over you. In that example, the funny thing is, when I heard that first example, my first instinct was, how do I make a cheaper NICU? How do I get cheaper plastics? How do I get a cheaper machine? These machines are $100,000. There's got to be a way to make it $20,000. But then, and again, that's kind of the penny dropping. Was I solving for the physicians or the doctors or the hospital? Or was I really solving for the baby? And to be honest with you, I forgot about the baby in that situation. And that's who you should be solving for. and I was solving for the wrong person. And design thinking helped me understand that. And that's kind of when I had some of those aha moments. I'm looking at some of the questions, and I see my brother in Dallas has asked the question, how do you apply this to sales culture? I think that's you just answered that. And I'm also looking at some of these people. I got some friends from Kazakhstan on, and some people from Hong Kong. It's crazy that we have people from all around the world. So great to see the participation. You guys know how to draw a crowd.
You know, one thing I'll mention here, there's a couple of questions that I'll just read. How do you make sure teams in a corporate environment implement their projects and prototypes after their work sessions? And then there's another question, which is seemingly unrelated, but it's actually very related, which is how do small tech startups with limited resources in a slightly chaotic environment get buy-in from the CEO to invest? And what I'd say is the answer to both those questions is actually the same, which is you want to scope down the work, the next steps so small that it's embarrassing to have not taken it. Basically, you want to and I posted a link. Hopefully the team can post a link. At Stanford, we teach a class called Launchpad, and there's a worksheet. There's a series of simple worksheets, but the one I want to draw everyone's attention to is a worksheet which we call the innovator's hypothesis or the founder's hypothesis. But if you can quickly establish what the human pain point we're trying to solve, how we think we can solve it, who has that pain point, then you can say, what's something we could try in 2 hours? We advocate what we call a 2-hour experiment. We don't spend any more time than 2 hours structuring some kind of clever interaction to test a hypothesis around your idea. But that's how both teams in corporate environments implement, and how small tech startups with limited resources in a chaotic environment can get buy-in. It's by making by lowering the bar to take action so much that you go, well, many times, especially in corporations, meetings end with what? With a resolution to have another meeting, right? That's how most meetings end. Let's talk about this again. But the thing is, unless there's new information, there's not a new conversation. And what experimentation does, and if you look at that worksheet, you'll see, is it just simply has a founder or an innovator state what their hypothesis is and push themselves to craft a clever experiment to test that hypothesis. And so what I would say is in the context of a corporation especially, how do you make sure people implement their projects? By the end of the conversation, if the meeting ends with a resolution to have another meeting, which they often do, at the very least, establish ownership. Who's going to commission an experiment, actually conduct the experiment? What kind of data are we hoping to see from that experiment? Could be open rate, click-through rate, response rate, whatever it is, right? And what is the threshold that will help us know whether this is something we should move forward or not? If there's very, very simple alignment around ownership and objective, the 2 O's you might say, then it's worth having another meeting. Most of the time, though, what happens is it's like this vague, we don't really know and we're not really sure, so let's talk about it later, as if time is somehow going to give us more insight. It's not. Action is what gives us more insight, but you've got to have a nice, tight scaffold for supporting action. And that's where a lot of folks fall down. I don't know, Steve. Go ahead. What were you saying?
No. I completely agree with you. And I think kind of you're going to learn by doing. And if you can make that process cheap, fast, frictionless, and the more you do it, the faster you do it and you iterate, the faster you're doing it faster than your competitors. And I think the pace of change is what's going to be key for people to keep up, because if you can't keep up with the pace of change, I think going back to all the quotes I think it was Jack Welch that said, if your competitor is changing faster than you can or than you are, then game over. And so I think that's key. And I remember in your program, you gave an example of the guy that developed an aircraft out of man-made power that went across the English Channel, and how he solved that was about making it cheap, fast, and easy. And that was one of those things to say, that's the secret to innovation. If I can make innovation frictionless, as cheap as possible, get people to learn quickly, then people can do this really quickly. They'll learn what doesn't work. We can share those ideas and we can learn off of each other. And we don't have to do duplicity work where that's very expensive and everybody has to learn every problem, what will work and what would not work. So yeah, that's kind of some of the really cool things that I got out of it. I did see one of the questions, I think Amanda Venus talked about fear of failure. And I think that stops a lot of people, right? So I'd like to kind of, I don't know, Justin or Jeremy, kind of get your guys is how do you overcome that fear? And failure is part of the equation. So what do you guys do to kind of give people that confidence to keep going and understanding that?
To me, I mean, a very simple, a very, very simple way to think about it is to set the expectation of cycles of learning. So nothing has ever worked on its first try ever, right? So if you don't fail, you'd basically be the first person in the history of the world for a new idea to work immediately, right? So like cue the Nobel Prize ceremony, right? So instead, have the expectation of learning comes in cycles. You know, the simple example is WD-40. You know why WD-40 is called WD-40? It's what happens when an engineer gets in charge of branding. It's water displacement 40. It's the 40th iteration of the formula to displace water, which is to say a well-funded team with a very clear problem took 40 tries to get it right? Most innovation efforts are less well-funded and they're less clear where they're going, right? Are they going to take more or less than 40 tries? They're probably going to take more than 40. But if you have this mindset of our goal is actually cycles, and what we're trying to do is not get right, is not find the right answer, but it's eliminate wrong answers quickly. You know, the old Edison adage, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I just found 10,000 things that don't work. And experimental mindset is largely indifferent to failure because it's eliminating non-viable pathways. And with a new idea, what you want to do is you want to recognize we don't have it right the first time, but the only way to learn how to make it right is to keep trying and to keep iterating. And so paying more attention to your learning speed. You know, there's a great podcast, Mark Randolph, the co-founder of Netflix with Reed Hastings. He talked with Tim Ferriss recently, and he talked about how in the early days of Netflix, long before they knew they were Netflix, right, they were trying a customized shampoo subscription and a customized dog treat recommendation engine, and also DVDs by mail, right? They were doing tons of stuff. In the early days, he talked about that they would commission these beautiful experiments that took, multiple weeks to gather data. And then, what they learned? It took them weeks to realize that they didn't have the right idea. And so then they said they became obsessed with, can we make it 1 week instead of 2? To learn. And then they said, can we make it 3 times a week instead of once a week? And then can we make it once a day? And then can we make it multiple times a day? But he said, we became obsessed with this idea of developing a system to quickly test bad ideas. And I think that is actually the core. It's not how do you deal with failure. It's recognizing if you're trying to do something new, you have to be in hyper learning mode. And in hyper learning mode, you're running a marathon, you're running laps. I don't know how many laps around a track a marathon is, but it's not a 400-meter sprint. You're running laps. And what we'd say is, and I think Steve can speak to this as well, a lap has to include the customer, right? If the customer's not involved, you haven't made a lap yet, right? But that's a simple way to think about it. And if you foreground the importance, the imperative of learning, then it means that failure, you reframe failure. It's not failure, it's just learning, and you take it in stride and you keep going and great, 1 cycle down, 39 to go, 1 cycle down, 38 to go, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know, Steve or Justin, if you have other thoughts there, but that to me is a radical reframe, and it's a critical thing for folks who are trying to do something new.
No, I think that's fantastic, and it's a great example. Justin, I saw you answered a question, and Bonnie Chung is actually one of the people calling from Hong Kong. And I saw her 55-5 rule. I haven't heard that. So would you mind just elaborating for the people on the call? What is that 55-5 rule?
Oh, I think she's referring to the 15-5 when you were talking about Einstein's quote. I thought that's what that's what she meant. Was to spend more time thinking about it before you jump in. Yeah. And what I was trying to convey in that answer is that, to me, part of the beauty of this design pedagogy is that within it, there are a series of tasks to achieve, but none of the tasks to achieve are necessarily the final outcome you're trying to get to, right? But because there are tasks to achieve, it helps achievement-oriented people like myself, people who are type A, who have a lot of tasks in their normal work, it helps them engage in something that actually pushes them to behave differently, right? And so what I was suggesting to her was, give people a task that actually has them think more than they have to do. So rather than just convincing them to do it, you give them a worksheet, or you give them a framework, or you say, hey, this came from Stanford, or this came from some other, brand that they respect or have heard of, right? You're creating wedges, you're creating room for people to work differently. And then as they start to do that, that action start to come from them, right? And it'll cascade without your prompts. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's part of what I like about it.
No, absolutely. Sorry, I'm going to mute because I've got.
Yeah, Jeremy, back to what you were saying, Jeremy, is failure is not failure; it's learning, right? And to me, I was responding to one of the questions. I was a journalist before, and I really like language, and I use rational language a lot, right? People are not resistant to the change you want to bring to your organization because they are mean, or because they are not smart, or because they are trying to hold on to power. Maybe that's true sometimes, but I prefer not to think that. I prefer to think that people are resistant to change because we all are resistant to change. It's the power of inertia. We are comfortable doing what we've learned how to do. And in many cases, we've created a self-image around what we're good at. And so it's hard to say, I'm going to try something that I've never done. And because I've never done it, I'm not going to be good at it. Who am I if I'm making mistakes all the time, right? And that's a difficult thing. And then in an organization, we often don't incentivize that behavior. So, but if you want to create something that's never been done, then you have to do something different. You can't do the same thing you've always done and expect a different outcome. That's the definition of insanity, right? So if we're going to do something different, we're inevitably going to make mistakes. We're going to learn from those mistakes in order to determine what we're going to do next. Okay, so that's my narrative. That's the way I describe it all the time. And I think the language of it, so that's what I call rational language. Doesn't that make sense? We can agree to that. I can see you're nodding, Steve and Jeremy, right? So now we got to do it, right? That's where it gets hard. If we can all agree we have to do something different to begin the journey to creating something that's never been done, that's a good place to start. Once we agree, now we can start doing it. And that's where, you encounter other obstacles. So anyway, try rational language with people.
One very simple, I would just add to that, Justin. I love that. I would add, if you're a manager and you're trying to build this sense of resilience on your team, a very, very simple tactic to create permission and also create a pull for this kind of behavior is just to say, what else are we trying? What else are we trying?
Yeah.
Not in a demanding way, but in a, really, we only have one answer here? Like, what else are we trying? And instead of bringing me one option, bring me 5 options. Let's try that. And instead of telling me how one thing went, tell me how 5 things went. In the early days of Amazon, I was just reading a biography of Bezos, and he has the Just Do It Award, where every year they would award someone for taking a bold action that didn't pan out very well, right? And so it's, how do you think about rewarding a different kind of action? How do you think about eliciting a different kind of action? I work with another executive team where they ask everybody to come in with a piece of inspiration from the weekend, right? So there are different ways where you can trigger and create space for new kinds of behaviors. But I love that simple, rational kind of explanation. If you want something different, you have to do something different. And for the big challenge is, how do you create the permission to do something different, recognizing that you want something different on the other side. And that's really what I think Steve has done a great job of doing in his organization. And I would say, just as a teaser to the next one, we're very excited to hear from some of the people for whom he's created that space. So thank you, Steve, for allowing us to have a little bit of window of insight. And we're excited to learn from the folks who you want to brag on and whose stories you didn't want to tell. We're excited to hear from them come September.
Guys, I'm very honored that you guys allowed me to kind of share my story with you guys, and I really appreciate it. And I love the friendship and the work that we've done together. So really proud of it. Robin, I guess you're already ready to passing it back to yourself. So.
Oh, joining the conversation. Thank you so much, all of you, for the very interesting and insightful hour that we spent. I feel like we answered a lot of questions and had some really great conversation. Thank you. Thanks, Steve, for joining us. To everyone in the audience with us live today, thank you for your questions and participation. It really makes the whole experience just that much more interesting and joyful. If you enjoyed the conversation and are interested in learning more, it would be a great idea if you check out the Creativity and Design Thinking program, which is linked in your dashboard with that really fun and colorful image. And that's it. We're signing off from Stanford. And Justin, you're signing off from Hawaii, and Steve from London, and Jeremy, I think you're about 10 minutes away from me. So everyone, thank you so much for the great conversation. Really appreciate it. Bye, everyone.